Hello everyone, welcome to NCERT 6 to 10 class in short. Today we will be discussing the first chapter of grade 7 history, tracing changes through 1,000 years. So let's move on to the video. In the beginning of the chapter, two maps are given. Let's call it as map 1 and map 2. Map 1 is made by Arab geographer Al-Idrisi in 1154 CE. The section reproduced here is the detail of the Indian subcontinent from his larger map of the world. That is, he has already prepared the larger map. From that map, a particular section is given here, that is of the Indian subcontinent. Here, South India is where we would expect North India, and Sri Lanka is the island at the top. See how it is figured there. Place names are marked in Arabic, and there are some well-known names like Kanauj in Uttar Pradesh. So just like how we mark the South India, here North India is marked here and the island can be seen. The second map is made by a French cartographer in the 1720s of the same area, that means the Indian subcontinent. This map has made 600 years after the first map, during which time information about the subcontinent had changed considerably. This map seems more familiar to us, right? And the coastal areas in particular are surprisingly detailed. This map was used by European sailors and merchants on their voyages also. Here we can see the South India and Sri Lanka at the bottom side, as we can see in the today's map. Now here is a question. Look at the areas in the interior of the subcontinent on map 2. Are they as detailed as those on the coast? Follow the course of the river Ganga and see how it is shown. Why do you think there is a difference in the level of detail and accuracy between the coastal and inland areas in this map? So why coastal areas are marked more detailed than or accurate than the inland areas? That is the question. Coastal areas are detailed more clear than inland areas here. This may be because it gives complete details for the voyagers or sailors who use the map. They can reach their destination through the sea without any confusion. It is meant for foreigners to reach India easily. As sea route was the main route of transportation on those days, the idea about the coastal areas should be clear so that it is marked more clear than the inland areas. Now a question arises, why there is difference in map 1 and 2. It is important to note that the science of cartography differed in the two periods. Historians have to be sensitive to the different historical backgrounds or contexts in which information about the past has produced, so that map 1 and 2 are different in their structures. Now about new and old terminologies. Historical records exist in a variety of languages which have changed considerably over the years. Medieval Persian, for example, is different from modern Persian. The difference exists not only in grammar and vocabulary but also in the meanings of the words. For example, consider the term Hindustan. Today we understand it as India, the modern nation state. But in the 13th century, Minhaj-e-Siraj, a Persian chronicler, used the term to describe the areas of Punjab, Haryana and the lands between the Ganga and Yamuna as Hindustan. He used the term in a political sense for lands that were a part of the dominions of Delhi Sultan. The term never included South India. By contrast, in the early 16th century, Babur used the term Hindustan to describe the geography, the fauna and the culture of the inhabitants of the subcontinent. The 14th century poet Amir Khusro used the term Hind to describe the same, that means the inhabitants of the subcontinent. While the idea of a geographical entity like India did exist, it did not carry the political and national meaning that we associate with it today. Now let's take another example, that is foreigner. It is used today to mean someone who is not an Indian, foreigner. But in the medieval period it was used to describe any stranger who appeared, say, in a given village, someone who is not part of that society or culture. For example, they were saying Paradishi in Hindi and Ajnabi in Persian. In their sense, a city dweller considers a forest dweller as a foreigner. But two peasants living in the same village were not foreigners to each other, even if they were of different religious or caste backgrounds. They were not foreigners to them. Historians and their sources. Here in this textbook, we are going to deal with the studies during the period of 700 to 1750 CE. As in the previous years, historians rely on coins, inscriptions, architecture and textual records to gain information. But there was a discontinuity in relying too much on inscriptions and architecture, as there was a dramatic increase in the textual records during this period, and hence they slowly displaced other types of available information during this period. Through this period, paper became cheaper and more widely available. People used it to write holy texts, chronicles of rulers, letters and teachings of saints, petitions and judicial records, and registers of accounts and taxes and all. Manuscripts were collected by wealthy people, rulers, monasteries, and temples. They were placed in libraries and archives. An archive means it's a place where documents and manuscripts are stored. Today, all national and state governments have archives where they keep all their old official records and transactions. These documents and manuscripts that were stored in the library or archive provided a lot of information to the historians, but they are also difficult to use. Compare the following situations. In the middle of the 13th century, a scholar wants to copy a book, but he did not have enough paper, so he washed the writing of a manuscript he did not want, dried the paper, and used it. And second case, a century later, that means in the 14th century, if you buy a food item from the market, you could be lucky and have the shopkeeper wrap it for you in some paper. So see the difference. The paper was a valuable one in the 13th century but a cheaper one in the 14th century. There was no printing press in those days, so scribes copied manuscripts by hand. As they copy, they introduce small changes, a word here, a sentence there. These small differences grew over centuries of copying until manuscripts of the same text become substantially different from one another. This is a serious problem because we rarely find the original manuscript of the author today. We are dependent upon the copies written by the later scribes. As a result, historians have to read different manuscripts of the same text to guess what the author had originally written. On occasions, authors revised their chronicles at different times. The 14th century chronicler Ziauddin Barani wrote his chronicle first in 1356 and another version 2 years later. The two differ from each other, but historians did not know the existence of the first one until the 1960s. It remained lost in large library collections. So these are some of the problems faced by our historians. Even if they have the material, they cannot access it properly. So that's all for today. The rest of the chapter will be discussed in the next video. Thank you and bye.